Hello and welcome back to One-on-One Shadowboxing. Have your say. We are here at the studios of WTV with Jerry Georgatos, and we are talking about the West Australian government decision to shut down remote communities, mainly and only remote communities where Aboriginal people live. This is affecting 150 remote communities, sort of immediate. And the reason for that, the state government reason is no funding to service the remote communities. Um, what do you think was the sort of reaction, Jerry, nationwide with the Aboriginal intellectuals?
Nationwide, as I travel a lot, I come into contact with a lot of First Peoples, but also others who are knowledgeable about what goes on in the Aboriginal body politic. One, they're horrified that in 2014 we would be considering closing down where people live, their communities. And many of these communities are people that have reclaimed country. It also makes a mockery of native title. They think native title is effectively being extinguished and rubbish, and it is seen as an opportunity to open up the vast interior and remove as many of the obstacles out of the way, which are the people and their right to country. That right and legacy should be entitled to all First People, even if their children move on and their grandchildren were not born in these communities. They have a place to come back to. Many people feel that the mainstays of those who have had the ear of government for many years, 20 years, for instance, arguably Professor Marsha Langton, Warren Mundine is the chairperson of the Indigenous Advisory Council, so it's a Prime Ministerial Advisory Group, and Noel Pearson, the Cape York orator.
These people's effigies just been burned down by Aboriginal people in a public demonstration.
The G20 in Brisbane, a lot of this is born out of frustration that they have had the ear of government and they have felt like they have made no positive change. That, for instance, all the indicators that we actually have about economic and social wealth, about reclaiming country and language and having this all funded, of supporting these communities that are now being threatened with closure, of just the general rights that every other Australian is actually entitled to, but a lot of First Peoples, and especially in the remote, are not entitled to, have not been supported by these individuals or have not actually leveraged gain. And the Aboriginal body politic, the mainstay of that, actually believes that they can see very little that they've actually achieved.
So there is a really sort of breakdown of the unity or the sort of separation you can observe now.
I see that there's a sense of where people are trying to define what the ways forward are and what's realistic, and actually a lot of people talk about sovereignty, which is for a non-Indigenous person a little bit difficult to understand. But in the end, someone like Yalme Yunupingu, the partner of the late Dr. Yunupingu, the founder of Yothu Yindi, she said to me, Jerry, one, we're not brainless and dumb. We can manage our own communities, our own affairs, we can speak in our own languages, and we should be managing our own schools and the ways forward. And for goodness sake, the government and the Commonwealth should be stepping back and allowing for us to take care of our land and communities as if it's an independent nation. And rather than be seen as bowing down to the Native Title Act or bowing down to the grace of the Commonwealth and however it wants to accord itself with people, or bowing down to the miners. Let them make the decisions about their country in the terms that they want to, as any other sovereign nation would. I think a lot of saying we're at the precipice, we're either going to assimilate and be lost, or we're going to, for want of a better word, go down the path of integration, which is to maintain the best of both worlds and navigate our way through it, but have our identity and not have that ripped away as it appears to them others have. On November 27, 28th in Alice Springs, there's the Freedom Summit. They've called for the traditional owners and the senior-most elders of all the nations to gather together, of all the nations of the First Peoples from around this continent, to gather together and converge at the end of this month in Alice Springs, and from that elect an assembly of First leaders to reclaim the Aboriginal rights struggle, to reclaim it, to turn up, as one of them said, we'll turn up as one, but stand solid as thousands. That's already picked up the attention of the Federal Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Nigel Scully, and he's fully aware of what the Freedom Summit could actually mean.
That's an exciting news. Thank you very much for that, Jerry. Uh, Back to this decision of the West Australian state government, Colin Barnett's government, on shutting down the remote communities. How does it can be justified, in Western Australia, where we got all these resources, which belongs to the earth and the first people who are living on this continent, on this earth still. So how can you, or how can anyone justify that?
You're asking me that question? I would have
Yes.
to say there is no justification for it. What there are reasons for it, and those reasons are assimilation, those reasons are to open up the vast interior, those reasons are to put a lot of the first people issues into the too hard basket, those reasons are to subsume a lot of this population into the larger towns and try and rid themselves of presumptions of social chaos that they actually argue, which I would say should be compartmentalised, but they're arguing a community dysfunction, which they are not. You talked about resources. Look, 45 million is pittance, Tibor. It's pittance. It's no justifiable excuse to close down these communities. It's actually in the interest of government to pay that 45 million because from a cost-benefit analysis, it will demonstrate that
Keeping them,
keeping them where they are or allowing them to
more
stay where they are
economical than
is more economical than relocating them and the social burden disasters that we will have in that transition. A lot of the language now being used is framed around the transition that we should be doing in a civilized manner. That is bullshit language.
It doesn't matter if they're moving them slowly or quickly.
Doesn't matter if they're moving them slowly or
The
fast.
principle is not being changed.
They have to move their own accord, as any peoples anywhere in the world. If they do this, and as I said, the more west we go across this country, the worse it gets for First Peoples. A lot of my academic qualifications are in the study of racism, the unveiling of racism and the ways forward. And I don't believe that we should be holding people hostage to racism, but the ways forward. But the reality is, in my view, as someone who has had the lived experience of racism because of the colour of my skin and the way I look, and has seen what First Peoples in this country have actually endured, and I've been with them for 30 years in communities in and out. This will be the worst act of racism, the ugliest act of racism contextually, because it is 2014, that I will have seen, and also I believe in 50, 60, 70 years or whatever, right, in this nation if they actually close down these communities. These are dark times, and both the federal and the state governments are making some very horrific decisions right across the country affecting First Peoples, believing that they're in their interest in terms of assimilation, also opening it up for other opportunists, the carpetbaggers and the miners and all that sort of stuff or whatever, right, where they come in. But what I'm saying is that they should, and also as a suicide prevention researcher and someone who's worked in these communities, they need to stay where they are. We will be damaging them psychosocially. We will be not just knocking up huge layers of racism. There will be acrimony and there will be hate, and the distrust will get to irreparable levels for a long time to come. We disenfranchise them further. We disempower them further. We actually decimate them. We can't do that, and it is up to people like Josie Farah, the Kidja parliamentarian for the Kimberley. It is up to people like Ben Wyatt, the Yamaji parliamentarian, who's also Native Titles portfolio holder and Treasury. He needs to scrub up, and he needs to argue the House down that this should not happen. The agenda is a long-standing one, and I take it back to the assimilation views that people have, their own prejudices. Whereas he said this was a spat, most recent, because the municipal services bill being pulled on them or whatever, right, defunded, yes, and that they've got to pick it up. Nigel Scullion said, well, no, actually, Colin Barnett's been talking to us about several years about closing down communities. I'll give one example of why it does not work and we create more social dysfunction. Umbulgari, yes, in the Kimberley was closed down in 2011. 62 houses are now being demolished. It's a beautiful place. And most of the people that I've met there, and I've met them in person, and I've been out there, I've been, yes, to the Kimberley, I've been to Umbulgari, whatever, right? These people that were, you know, camaraderie, community understandings, happy. Yes, there were social ills, but where aren't there social ills? Is anyone going to tell me some of these non-Aboriginal communities, or Perth, which actually apparently has 68,000 methamphetamine users? 1 in 25 of all people in Perth actually use some quantity of methamphetamines on a regular basis. Do we close down Perth? Because of that, we compartmentalise it and try and address the social ill as best we can. But Umbulgari was closed down because of 4 suicides and some dysfunction, which was part of the community, not the whole of the community. What they did then was made a lot of people homeless. Eventually they relocated them mostly to Wyndham. Some finished up in Kununurra. Others I've met homeless at Kennedy Hill, which is a shanty town near demolished now in Broome. The social ills that actually occurred in Umbulgari, in that compartmentalised scenario that I'm talking about were then in a contagion effect compounded to the people of Wyndham. Uh, there was a suicide of a 12-year-old child from Bulgaria, a former resident last year in Wyndham, and the last person standing in Bulgaria who did not want to go, did not want to leave, a 44-year-old gentleman who was proud of his home, proud of his garden, proud of his connection to where his family
And
has
his
been for
life,
several generations.
yes.
Yeah, his life. He took his life last year because he was unhappy, he was depressed. And a lot of these people are now living homeless in tents on the outskirts of Wyndham and itinerant. And they've been campaigning since then to go home, since then to reclaim their homes. And even with their homes now demolished or being demolished, they want to go back to where they came from and what they have known as their home. And it's a legacy that they can't give their children. That entitlement
That's the heritage.
is heritage. It's
It's-
part of identity. It's psychosocial.
With Aboriginal people, is more than heritage. This is their home, the
And
whole
we're
land.
trying to smash that, Tibor. This Western Australian government is working in the same assimilationist ways and in the same policies, no different to the White Australia policy, the Edmund Barton days, the same assimilationist policies that saw A.O. Neville remove so many kids during the stolen generation and all the apartheid that we went through. And it is a modern day, a contemporary apartheid that we're doing. We're smashing their identity, their hopes and their dreams, who they are, and as you said, their belonging and connection to country.
On that note, Jerry, we have to finish, and I wish you good luck, and whoever attending to the Freedom Summit end of this month, good luck, guys, and I hope you can make it. Please come back next week, same time, same channel. One-on-one shadowboxing. Have your say.